Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 484. Happy holidays. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge. I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, the Duke of and the elder statesman of the podcast.
How's it going, eh?
On this episode, we actually wanted to release an episode actually on Christmas Day. So Merry Christmas out there to everyone who celebrates it. For everybody who celebrates other things or non-denominational, whatever. I hope you're having a great holiday season. On this episode, we're going to be discussing Batman number 13, Cave Carson has a cybernetic eye, number 3, Action Comics number 969. We've got a packed episode, so let's jump right into it. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Jim, we are sponsored this episode, as always, by the great DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. What is going on over at DCBService.com?
Well, of course, we got our bundles. They're continuing the support of Rebirth. They're continuing their support of Vertigo, of the Young Animals. They're giving some cool discounts on the covers. One of the things I love about these bundles is each one, there's multiple packs. You pick and choose which one you want to go with. If you're only collecting these certain titles or if you're collecting them all, it's easy. Click one-stop shopping. But you know what else? The cool things about DCBS I like is they have a lot of just the individual loose issues out there. Going back to some of the Rebirth stuff, some of the pre-52, some of the new 52 stuff. They have these other titles out there, and it's they have their overstock, and they'll give you some great discounts on it. So as you're don't just click on your bundles. Look at the individual issues. See what else they have out there. Maybe you got some filler and some gaps in your collection. And, of course, there's the hardcovers. Batman 66 meets Steel and Mrs. Peel hardcover, 50% off, $12.49. $12.49 for a hardcover. You gotta love it. So thank you, DCBS.
I want to remind everyone they're a digital partner, whether you do Comixology or My Digital Comics. Make sure to link those accounts and shop through their portal. You go to their website, shop through their portal that way. You get 5% of those purchases towards your DCB service order. It adds up quickly. Over at InStockTrades.com, I love their deals of the week, and they've got some really cool ones right now. They've got the Superman Action Comics hardcover, Volume 9, 50% off, only $12.49. Superman Wonder Woman hardcover, Volume 5, Savage End, 50% off, only $12.49. We got to talk a little bit about Marvel on this one. The Amazing Spider-Man Epic Collection. Great Responsibility trade paperback. This is like one of their omnibus collections. This is like over 400 pages. This thing is only $19.99 at 50% off. It collects Amazing Spider-Man 18 to 38 and annual number 2. Huge collection. I'm a big fan of these things. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy to the world the Lord has come. Enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics. Jim, there's one thing before we go into talking comics. I actually want to follow up something from last episode. David Wallace called in and was talking about the Telltale Games Batman game and talking about some of the... I'm not going to spoil this. He was just talking about some controversies in it. I'll leave that at that. since we talked on that episode, I'd finished episode 5, which I had not done when David was sharing it. I knew that what he was talking about, the controversy he was talking about, was where the story was going. So he didn't spoil anything for me, but I got to the ending of it, and I want to give some final impressions of it to come back for people maybe who are interested in playing this game. And I'm going to do it spoiler-free. It's interesting having played the game all the way through to the end and thinking about, do I want a season 2? Because there's 5 episodes of this game, and if you haven't played a Telltale game before, they usually release the first episode of the game, and then you buy a season pass, where about every month or so you get a new episode of the game. The way that this Batman game worked is you play as Bruce Wayne / Batman. You make decisions along the way in the game that have an impact to the story. So if you've ever read the Choose Your Own Adventure books, it's a lot like that. But it's interactive, where you're using bat gadgets at different point in time. You're controlling the combat. It's very interesting. It's not like an action game where you're punching and doing all that kind of stuff, but you do have to do in time button presses and controller movements to dodge things, avoid things, enact your various bat gadgets during combat. So it does feel like a very interactive story. Your choices are the biggest part of the game, though, because there's certain parts of the game where you can choose to handle a situation as Bruce Wayne. You can choose to handle it as Batman. You control dialogue decisions and actions that you do, and they have a pivotal impact on the story. There's certain points where your choices will take the story in a very different direction because of how it happens, and change relationships and affect people in the game. So David shared a controversy in the game, and I shared my opinion of it too, and we were largely on the same page on that piece. But I kind of wanted to, now that I've played the whole game through, give my overall impressions of the game. The controversy I agree with him on, and actually what worked for me is this game feels very Elseworlds to me. It's its own universe. They aren't beholden to current comic book continuity, so they're crafting their own. The best way to look at it is, like the Earth 1 graphic novel, how that was clearly starting Batman in its own world. This is a lot like that, where it's its own story from start to finish. They've made their own interpretations of the Batman mythos. It sticks pretty close, but they make some pretty pivotal changes that David alluded to on the last episode, and I don't want to spoil them here. The one thing I liked at the end, though, when I got done with episode 5, I'm like, as an overall experience, how do I feel about it? I really liked it as an overall experience. And I really do want a season 2, because what will happen with the Telltale games, your choices at the end, they tell you what they were and how they compare to other people from around the world. What the percentages are, how many people did the same things that you did. You can choose to go back and play the game and make other choices to see what it would have been like. I'm sticking to my experience. The choices that I made, that was my Batman story, if that makes sense. So I want those to stick. Telltale, if they do a season 2, typically what they do is your choices carry over. So your story continues. And they'll say, like, previously on Batman, the Telltale game, this is what happened, and they will import your choices from the last game, and they will actually have impact on the next game. So I do hope that this was successful enough that they're going to do a season 2 of it, because they did that with Walking Dead, and I really found that engaged me into the sequel, where it was nice to know that my story was canon, if that makes sense, instead of finding out that, like, okay, in season 2, 3 of the choices that I made in the last game didn't count. They really wanted you to make this choice. I like the carryover. So there was some real buy-in to this, and I thought it was a really great game. The Batman game, doesn't end in a cliffhanger. The story comes to a complete close, but there's a major Batman villain at the end that they set up for. And it's their version of that major Batman villain. So it would be basically that character's origin, and you get to see that character play off. And I was really excited to see that at the end. So I'm not trying to be deliberately vague with this. I'm trying to be spoiler-free. Other than to say, if you haven't played this game, I think it's well worth playing. There are some bits that are going to feel controversial to Batman purists, and they did to me as well. I do feel it's Elseworlds, and I really enjoy it as that experience. I think the story's really compelling overall on what it does. But there is one, I will warn you ahead of time, there's one pivotal thing that they do in this that's going to make you go, really? They're going there. But they own it, and they make it a major part of the story, and there is a resolution to it in where you can feel like, okay, this is where the character would go from here. So as an overall experience, I really did enjoy it. Very Elseworlds, and I love it as that piece. I do hope we get a second season out of it, because I want to see my choices impact another game. I'm into that. So, and obviously as comic fans, it's a serialized medium. So I just wanted to follow up on it just because I finished it off. It was great to get the Platinum Trophy, and, I got the ding on there, and my score went up, and I like all that kind of stuff. But I really did enjoy it as a Batman experience, barring what we talked about in the last episode.
Hey, quick question for you.
Sure.
Because I've never done the Telltale games, and I keep looking at them, and I keep thinking about doing them, and then for whatever reason I don't. And when you play through once, can you go back through, replay again, and how does that affect the story?
Well, you start a new save game.
Oh, okay. You can start multiple save games and you go multiple universes, etc.
Right. So like I did that with Walking Dead because I wanted the trophies. So in order to get like certain trophies in Walking Dead, you had to make both choices. And in Walking Dead, it was a decision between saving one person over saving another. So you had to go back through, and you could just play that portion of the chapter, save the other person. So then you get the ding and you get your trophy, and so I'm like, okay, we'll do it for that reason. I'm not usually. Here's the thing I love about it. I think where you're going is cool. You want to see all sides of the story, like all potential possibilities. So that's cool. For me, I kind of look at it like the way I play role-playing games. Like, I just want to go through and have my experience, and that's my version of the character. I actually like the flexibility, though, that what you're asking is something you can do. You're right to do it. You have the ability to save the game again and either start from the beginning or just jump to the chapter where there's the choice that you want to do differently and save that as its own save. You can duplicate a save. So, yeah, you can do that, and it's cool. So, I'm trying to think, boy... So now you got me curious. I'm like, are there choices in the game that I want to see the other side of? There's one in particular I can think of where it involved saving one person over another, and because it really was a timing issue. I would like to see what would happen on the other side of it. So maybe I would do that again just to see it. I don't know. I'm pretty invested in my Batman story.
Because you mentioned choose your own adventures, and that was the thing I always loved about doing that. Is I'd go through, then I go back through, and I'm like, okay, I did this last, and what happens this? And I always loved doing that kind of stuff. And with City of Heroes, I used to make similar type characters that I would actually, one's on one server, then I'd go to the other server, and I have almost the exact same character, same build, but I would try a different route for that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, that's just it. It's and I didn't use that lightly because, like you, I had a shelf full of Choose Your Own Adventure books, and I just think they were just really cool. I liked the interactivity. I liked feeling like my decisions impacted the story. So, yeah, it's very much that. And I did reread them and have a different story for the same reason. It sounds like you and I handle Choose Your Own Adventure books the exact same way. So, yeah, I don't know. It'd be very cool to do that. I did it with Walking Dead and really liked it. So I do recommend the Telltale games. I really like them. If you liked the old point-and-click adventures, it's obviously it's a spiritual successor to those, but now you're able to have, I think, a different level of interactivity than you could with those because it's not all just pointing and clicking. So it's taken to like a different level, and I really do like the fact that on some of them, if they have sequels, your decisions carry over, so your story really goes on. Walking Dead's that way, where all of the episodes and all of the sequels carry over. They just released the newest Walking Dead. I haven't started playing it yet, but I want to see if my story carries over for this one. So, I don't know. It's kind of cool. It'd be great to see that, even on some level, just carry over and just know that it's still my story continuing as a big thing. So, I don't know. I wanted to shout the Batman game out because I thought it was really cool overall as an experience. And I do hope it gets a sequel because, or that they explore another DC character. I know they're doing a Guardians of the Galaxy game. They got the license of that from Marvel. I knew they were doing a Marvel game, and I didn't know which one it was, and they just recently announced it's going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy game. I'm very into that idea, yeah. So, obviously these things are successful, so I'm glad to hear it. Can we talk Action Comics, actually, as our kickoff on this one? Action Comics 969. Dan Jurgens is the writer, Patrick Zerker on art, Rob Lay, letterer, Arif Prianto is the colorist, Tyler Kirkham, and Arif Prianto, I'm butchering his last name, Prianto, cover by Gary Frank and Brad Anderson, variant cover by Paul Kaminsky, associate editor Mike Cotton, editor Eddie Berganza. I'm sorry, I'm reading that wrong. Paul Kaminsky is the associate editor, Mike Cotton is the editor, Eddie Berganza is the group editor. Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family. And apologies for butchering that, because I really love this creative team. And it's funny, we talked a couple episodes ago about the Superman title and how much we were digging that book. And totally stand behind my comments on that. But man, reading this Action Comics cycle, because I read about 5 of these issues back to back just because I gotten behind on Action Comics. This Lois Lane story that's going on is killer. I really enjoy seeing her. Lois has felt the need now to, through her investigations, to take over the life of the New 52 Lois Lane, who is no longer with us. She's found a way to take over that life and to be Lois Lane and to assume that identity. I like it because she's back at the Daily Planet. It's great to see her going back into her life. I like that they didn't drop the Lois Lane story from the New 52. That's part of the mystery of this. And I really enjoy where that's going. We've got also this mysterious Clark Kent. What is he doing there? What's his deal? Because it's the human Clark Kent. And we've got our Superman and Lex Luthor as Superman. I'm really loving the fact that Lois and Superman, I should say, don't trust Lex. They have the rich history with him in our previous universe. They know that he's got, his intentions. So they don't trust this guy. They're keeping an eye on him in their own ways. Lois is doing it as an investigative reporter. Clark's doing it in his own way as Superman. I'm gonna keep flipping between Clark and apologizing for it because we got 2 Clark Kents, which
well, we got Clark and we got fake Clark is how I've been looking at it.
Sure.
The Clark that is Superman that's got a kid and is married to Lois, that's Clark Kent.
Right.
I don't know who the fake guy is, but he ain't Clark Kent. Part of me, and the more I get in, the more I read in the Action Comics, I'm like, he's a bad guy. I'm going to throw out there that he isn't just some innocent bystander and all this. I think he has an active knowledge on the mystery and the secret and who he is and whatnot. I don't think he's as innocent as he's playing. I think he was created for a purpose, and the purpose is to take down Superman.
Wow. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think all bets are off.
He's sending off too many bad. He's got my my spidey sense tingling. I'm like, he's a bad guy. I just, the one scene that really kind of had me locked in that he was a bad guy was when Lois was in the office, and she's getting ready to type in that password that the New 52 Lois had left her, and he shows up and he trips and he spills coffee and ruins the computer. And she's like, wait, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, hey, he doesn't want her logging onto the computer. Mm-hmm. That's the first thought that popped in my head was, okay, why does he not want her logging onto the computer? Because he's the bad guy. So that's one of the main things that has me locked in on he's the bad guy here.
Could it be it genuinely was what it looked like? And you're meant to be thinking that.
100% could be. 100% could be. But I don't know. And again, later on there's probably going to be multiple times when I change my opinion. But right now I'm thinking he's a bad guy. And it's the only thing that stops me from thinking he's a bad guy is the fact that he hasn't put 2 and 2 together and figured out why the real Clark doesn't trust him, why he thinks he's lying. That's the only thing that keeps me from thinking he may actually be an innocent in this. He's not real. He's something else, because there is no human version of Clark Kent, actually. There's the Kryptonian who lost all his powers, but there's no true human version of Clark Kent. So he doesn't exist. So he's got to be something fake. He's got to be something generated somewhere by some creature or by science or whatnot. I'm not sure, but he's not real. The backstory he has is a very clever backstory, but it's not the actual true story of Clark Kent.
I think our Clark is the real Superman. Now, let me clarify that because we had the New 52 one. I think one of the things we're going to find out of this is just my speculation, is that he's been the real Superman all along. And he was taken out of the game for some important reason because he's Superman. That's kind of my speculation on the whole thing. I think we're going to find out that this was a plan all along to keep Superman on the shelf. And at least I think. I know that there's a storyline coming. There's a Superman and Action Comics crossover that's coming that's supposed to be really delving into this mystery. And I can't wait to read it. I don't care if I'm wrong. I like speculating on this. But right now, my assumption is that we're going to find out that this Lois and Clark are the real and always have meant to be the real Lois and Clark. in this world. I still think, this is again, it's speculating. So if you disagree with me listening to this, great, and you're allowed to, because none of us know right now what's going on. I still maintain that because of Flashpoint, this is our world, and something happened along the way, and it's the stuff that we saw, with Ozymandias, that's going on when they were taking a look at Dr. Manhattan. They did something to this world. It is our world. I think.
And we're looking at the possibility of a complete reversion back to the pre-New 52. We're looking at that possibility, but I don't think it's going to be as clean as that.
No.
I think some of the characters are going to be the current version. I think we're going to keep our current version of Batman that we have, and it's not going to revert back to what was the pre-52. So we're going to have a younger Batman who's not as broken. And because the current Batman that's out there isn't, especially after his whole process that he went through, where he stopped it, where he quote unquote died, and everything that he went through, his body got regenerated. So I think we're going to keep that Batman. We're going to keep a little bit older, a Superman who's a little bit older, who's this guy, because this is the main Superman. I think Aquaman's probably going to stay as Aquaman. Flash is the Flash. So I think it's going to be a weird kind of, there's going to be some crazy stuff is going to happen with different characters. And I want to see it play out. I want to see it happen. And to be honest, again, like you said, if I'm wrong, cool. Tell me a cool story. That's my whole focus. But the fact that I'm sitting here and I'm looking at those scenes, I'm looking at what could be a simple throwaway panel, and I'm giving it so much more weight to it that tells you I'm really into this story. I'm really into this mystery, and I'm very happy with and it's I don't know if you run into this problem, but sometimes I have the story of Superman and Action Comics so blended together that sometimes I'm like, now did that happen in Action or did it happen in Superman? So if I throw out a quote and I'm quoting something from Superman title, that's why. And that's, to me, is a great sign of the Superman universe in that it could all occur. And it's a great storytelling that these two different any of these Superman titles that are affecting each other, they're written so well and so connected that it could be one individual issue. And I think that for me is something I'm deeply enjoying about the Superman universe, throwing even Superwoman and Supergirl into the mix as well, with all of the different super titles that are out there. We're getting a cohesive story being told.
You and I are completely having the same experience. I'm with you. It's funny. I keep wanting to choose a favorite, and I think we did that in the last episode with Superman. But I think the way you just put it now is really a lot more my experience having read this. I'm really loving all 4 issues that we get between these 2 books. It's about as close as you can get to the diamond bulleted, Superman, that we used to have. You and I were big fans of that when it was weekly, and it was a different creator on all 4 books. And they even had that 5th book, Man of Steel, or Man of Tomorrow. I think it was Man of Tomorrow, maybe, where they had that it was the quarterly book that they gave you a book even on that 5th week. Yeah. I really was a big fan of that era of Superman because I liked the continuing, ongoing, serialized story. You're right in the sense that I like that Action has its own story. I like that Superman has its own story going on, but I also like how editorially tight that they are. And I think the writing teams have done a great job of being really well aware of what's going on in both books, and these books feel like they're existing at the same time. And I agree with you on that experience. I'm having trouble remembering what happens in what book because I'm just really enjoying the whole Superman experience right now. When you and I were first deciding what issue we were going to kick off on this one, because we're going to talk about Batman 12 later, and I'm a Batman guy. I really like that right now I'm enjoying my comics so much that I have no problem saying, hey, dude, I'm really excited to talk Batman, but I'm just as excited to talk Action Comics. So I wanted to talk Action Comics first this time, not because Batman's any lesser quality. Batman's stellar, and I really want to talk about that story from I Am Suicide. But just as much, I want to talk about what's going on with Clark, with Lois, with fake Clark. I don't know that I agree with you that he's a bad guy. I don't know that I disagree with you that he's a bad guy. The jury's still out with him, and I really like that the story's compelling. I don't know what his deal is. Is he a victim in this? I think that there's a lot of avenues for that character. Here's the thing that's great about it is it's compelling.
Yeah.
Any of those possibilities are compelling. If he's a bad guy, great. It's going to be interesting to see that when that comes out and when it pays off. The question is, he doesn't know the secret, right? He doesn't know what's going on with Clark and Lois. I find that interesting. I find that he's seeing clues to it and he's reacting to them. So I'm enjoying watching him. And he is a fun character to watch. There's a part of me that thinks he's legit and genuine. And he was, I agree with you that he was somehow created, but I don't know that he's anything more than he seems to be. Although somebody could, if he was created and he's a mole and he's being put in the middle, he could be created for the purpose of earning trust so then the switch can be flipped later.
Right.
Which often happens with a Trojan horse. So I don't know. What do you think? What if we found out at the end that he's totally legit? He really is the Clark Kent of this world. And this world happens to have a human Clark Kent. What do you think about that? Would you be good with that?
Wow. Actually, here's the thing. I probably would be good with it just because it is a different story. Mm-hmm. And it is kind of neat to have the swerve. Would it be my first choice? Of course not. My first choice is always to have Superman be Clark Kent.
Right.
Because I always like the fact that he does that to get the connection to people. He does that to, so he's not just on the job 24/7. He has his downtime. He has his break time. He has his connection with humanity. But this Superman, his connection to humanity, because he had some really cool conversations with him and John where, John's asking, is it tough being Superman, hearing all the stuff all the time. And he breaks it down how it's the time with his son and with his wife and just the life they live that helps him, reconnect and readjust and, deal with that. So this Clark has a connection. He does have that. So he doesn't technically need to be the reporter at the Daily Planet. He can have his other ways to connect to humanity through his son and his wife. So they don't technically need to have that aspect of the story. Now, I always personally choose because I like it, but if they said no, that's not the case with this time, you wouldn't see me, storming the castle to, with the pitchforks and the torches and the pitchforks. I'd be like, oh, cool, okay, this is a different way to do it. And then I'd be even more curious about the human Clark, saying, right, okay, who is this guy? What's he about? Does he have, the Superman-esque characteristics? Because we've already seen one thing, that he's not like Superman in that he's like, hey, let Luthor die. That was one of those. What did he just say? Let Luthor die? Wait a minute, you're not supposed to say that. You're a good guy.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm finding the character interesting. I'm with you. Superman's Clark to me. That's why I was having such trouble stumbling over it. It's Clark Kent. I don't care what he calls himself when he's on the farm right now. He is Clark Kent. We know he's Clark Kent. He's been Clark Kent forever. So I don't know. I'm finding this very interesting. And for people like anybody out there who thought that the super marriage isn't cool, oh my gosh, I'm really enjoying Clark and John and Lois, and that they've got a kid and that the kid has impact, and the dialogue between dad and son in this book, which it's something I love in the Superman title. I thought the stuff when they were talking about costumes, where John was asking him all kinds of questions about the underwear on the outside, I loved that. That was a pure geek out moment. And I love that, they're going into some dangerous situations in these books, and John is becoming a hero in his own right, wants to help Dad. He sees this happening and knows he has powers and can do it. Dad's also aware that, his son has certain limitations. He has certain powers that seem to be surpassing Superman's, which is interesting to read and learn about. But he has other powers where they don't seem to kick in at the right times. His invulnerability in particular seems to be having issues comparatively to what's going on with Superman. So it's really fun to see him growing as a character, growing as a hero, and seeing Superman's interactions with him. He's trying to teach him along the way, and I like that journey of seeing Dad trying to teach son. John being a bigger part of the DC universe is something I want to see more of. He's growing on me the way Damian did gradually over time. I like that he's different. He's unique. I can't wait till Super Sons comes out. I don't want him to be taken out of this book because of it. I want to see him in all locations, kind of like World's Finest didn't take Superman or Batman out of their respective titles. So I do want to see that. I wouldn't mind seeing that kid eventually on Teen Titans. Not that he has to be in all those places, but he's a character that's interesting enough that I want to see him guest starring in places. I want to see him featured because I want more. And I think that's when you got a new creation like that, it can either fall flat and blow up in your face, or it can be compelling. I'm a Connor Kent fan. I've always loved the Superboy that came before this. I liked Superman as Superboy as a kid growing up. You know, Clark Kent, young Clark Kent. I always enjoyed those stories as well. This is a great way to continue on the legacy of what Superboy is with a different take on it. What if it's really his kid? What is that like? I love that. This is how you make a compelling marriage. You don't have to have every DC character married or have this sense of progression. But man, doing it with these two, absolutely the right move. Whoever made this call, I don't know how long this was in the works. This was really, really smart because I have not been this excited about I liked the New 52 Superman just fine. I was digging those stories. But man, this is a different level of excitement for me right now and what's going on in the Superman books. Action Comics, when I started reading these books, I could not put them down. It was ba-bam, 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 issue after issue. I wanted more. I wanted to see what was going on with Lois. I loved seeing her interacting with the Daily Planet bullpen, especially being that it wasn't her bullpen, but she's noticing the qualities that she remembers. Perry being so glad that she was back, the hugs, the embraces, the genuine feeling, it felt like a coming home. And it was great to see how that played out in this book in particular. This was really a smart move. I liked seeing Lois reintegrate into the Daily Planet and bringing the Daily Planet back as something worthwhile to the Superman titles. I'm going to be very curious to see what they do with it and how they address newspapers' roles and how they've shifted and what her role means. I think it's cool.
Oh, God, yeah. And I like the fact that she's coming back into this. There's still this book she's supposed to write, because that was the cover that the other Lois gave out, that for her to be away that she was writing this book on Superman and his death, etc., and all that stuff. So there's still that book to come up. But I do like the fact that Lois isn't just chasing down stories. She's doing these interviews, and she's doing, and it's part of it is she's interviewing Luthor because they're, again, as we said earlier, they don't trust them. But there is still, it's not just that simple anymore. Lois wants to live again, and it's kind of a weird, in a way she's thinking of somebody other than, she wants this other life to live. Because this world's Lois has a father, a sister, friends, all these different people. And I love the interaction they had with Lana, where she was saying, hey, I couldn't tell everybody that knows Lois that she's dead. How do you tell that story? Oh, by the way, she's got superpowers and she's dead. How do you do that to people? And I love just that emotional connection. I think that for me is something I want to see, is Lois balance her quote unquote real life and this Lois's life, and how much of that gets meshed and merged together. Because one of the things that popped in my head as a possible storyline to go is Clark 2, or fake Clark, or non-Clark, or whatever we're going to call him. Maybe he isn't a bad guy. Maybe he is just an unknown party in this, and maybe he has a temporary shelf life. Maybe part of this process, the body's going to break down, or they're going to do something, and we're going to be minus a Clark Kent. So maybe Superman once again becomes Clark Kent. So now you got Lois and Clark back in the Daily Planet, but now they have this kid they have to keep hidden. Or do they announce that they quote unquote adopted? Or how do you explain this? And do they leave the farm? And there's so many different ways this story can spin and go and twist. I'm sitting there just giddy with anticipation of where the story might go. And this may go all these crazy ideas I've had may not happen. And again, it's what the story's going to, it's the, choose your own adventure kind of thing. It's that, where's this going to go? What's next? What about this? What about that? And you're looking at, and just that for me is how excited I am about Action Comics and about the Superman stories. Before this, I was digging the story. I was like, yeah, it's kind of cool. I was thinking a little bit off page. What about that? Maybe that. Nothing to the level I am doing now. So I loved it before. I have gone to a whole nother level of, oh my God, is the Superman universe outstanding? And it is just an absolute. I am so excited that the Big Blue is getting this type of treatment, and it's not just him, it's his son, it's his wife, it's the people that they're the regular everyday normal people, and I do air quotes on the word normal when you're dealing with their circle of friends, but how they're dealing with these people, anytime there is just so many different ways they can go with this. And I'm like, and that's even outside of the cool stories that they're fighting these big bad guys who have superpowers, and they got dealing with Lex, or dealing with all this craziness. Just the inner normal human regular everyday reactions is exciting.
Don't you think the onus is on comic creators to do that, though? When they come onto a book and they make a pitch, they take a look at what's already working, and you got to recognize you got a fan base that's already there. I don't want to diminish my enjoyment of what was going on in the New 52 with Superman before. I was into it, so I'm not saying that I'm not. I'm not backpedaling. I think you're putting it very well. You get kicked up to an 11 and then beyond, and a 12, then a 13. And I think that's what writers, when they come onto something, they have to take a look at what's really working, what's grabbing people right now, and how do we recapture readers that have lapsed, and also a new audience, people maybe who haven't read before. What do we do that's that compelling hook? But the trick is, and where it's really special, when that hook is not shallow, when it's got some substance and depth to it, there's a story there that has so many, you're talking to choose your own adventure, so many different possibilities, so many different avenues you could go with it. All of them are equally compelling. And that mystery in and of itself of so many characters in this book right now are what's keeping me going. We got a mystery going with Lex right now. Lex is being attacked and scheduled for execution because of the fact that it looks like in his future he becomes Darkseid Luthor. And that is something where you take a look at that, and I even like the reference to Hitler. If you saw Hitler as a baby, that came up in Doctor Who recently. What would you do? Could you kill a child? Could you kill an innocent man if you knew they were going to become something? Because you don't know the circumstance. What makes him become Darkseid Luthor? Is this man really responsible for who he could potentially become or not? And I like that argument. I don't know that I look at this Lex right now and what he's doing, and I say to myself, I could kill him. Even seeing the future, it's more of this Lex would not want to become that. This Lex would do everything in his power to fight becoming that. That's not saying that makes him a good guy, but I don't see him wanting to become Darkseid. I see him wanting power on Earth, not on Apokolips. So interesting to see this story and kind of going, I don't think the guy's protesting too much. I think he really does not want to become this and would do everything in his power to fight that. So there's a true story there to it. But yet I can see the other side of it with them going, I made my whole life over stopping atrocities from happening because I've seen atrocity in my own life. How can I let you live if you're going to become this and what it does to all those people? Am I right to stand aside when I can prevent that from happening? That's the other twist to it, and it becomes compelling because I get it.
Whenever you deal with these, justice based on future events, and there's been multiple TV shows, movies, and everything. That Minority Report was that one Tom Cruise movie that was really cool that dealt with this murder, and and they're arresting people before they even thought about committing the crime because they knew they were going to commit the crime, and it was the whole future type of police, you're being charged and arrested for a crime you didn't even realize you were going to do. And it's the exact same story with Luthor, how he's being, brought in and punished. But it is funny that we're talking about Luthor here because we know there is definitely the potential for him to become Darkseid.
Sure.
We saw that when he first got the Mother Box, and when he first integrated the Mother Box into his armor. There is a chance for corruption. Now, do I think they should execute him? Of course not. And I'm not just saying that because I love the character Luthor. I'm saying that even if this was not Lex Luthor, if this was just another villain or another person or whatnot, I would still say you can't execute based on the future events. And also by showing him the future, by telling him you become this monster, maybe that's the creation of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe these bad guys beating on him is the creation of the event that that drives him to become Apocalypse, a Darkseid Lex. It's the whole what came first, the chicken or the egg? What truly made this evil world destroyer Luthor? Was it Luthor? Was it his Mother Box? Was it, just him being a bad seed? Or was it the fact that these people who could see the future came in and beat the holy heck out of him? And he said, hey, I got to really beef up my armor. I got to really beef up my power. And in that process, that's what creates Dark Luthor. So there's so many things that once again, these are avenues they're going to explore, avenues they're looking at. And this, of course, Superman's like, hey, I can't let him die. Even though it's Lex, even though in my universe he's one of the ultimate bad guys, this guy hasn't done anything wrong. I have to stand and I have to fight him and I have to save him. And I love that. And again, that's always the stuff you love about Superman, the fact that he would do that. And I love the fact that Luthor, in his own way, he's trusting that Superman's going to come, and he's stalling. He's bobbing and weaving. He's doing what he can because he knows Soup's on the way, because that's what the big blue Boy Scout does.
I can't. I'm looking at Lex right now, and I can't help but start laughing as I'm looking at Luthor. I told you a couple episodes ago I was watching Robot Chicken, and the second DC Comics special again. So they're in the Legion of Doom headquarters, right? And they're passing around a phone and laughing and giggling. And you know how people will find YouTube videos of somebody's past, and they'll pass it around and go, look at what he was doing. So it turns out Lex Luthor was a part of a hair band called Sex Luthor. So it's him with a big, long, blowing blonde locks in a hairband singing about the band's name, Sex Luthor. It is one of the funniest things. And just because I've watched it so recently, I'm looking at Lex and I'm like, this is the lead singer of Sex Luthor. How can you kill him? Yeah. So as this storyline goes on, we see this killer LaCall. There comes a point in time where you do this so much and you kill people, and you see, I like that he's torn. This is a way to make a compelling villain, because I see both sides of him and it's almost endearing. I killed all of these people because I'm trying to stop atrocities, but I've also seen the family members, the loved ones, the people associated with him that either I've had to kill or destroy their lives by killing the person that they were close to, because it was for the greater good. But that's worn on me over time. He's lost his smile, for lack of a better purpose. And I really found the development of this character very interesting, because we got to see that flashback to him several weeks ago. And it really came at the right time, I thought, in the story. This book has great pacing. They know just when to say, okay, we've thrown this guy at you. Let me tell you a little bit about him and what his backstory is, and make him interesting. Preacher, I reference that book a lot as being one of my favorites, and they did this with Saint of Killers, where they eventually told his backstory, and it was really interesting. They did this right here with LaCall, and I found this character to be really interesting and compelling. And I hope this is a character that will appear again in the future. I know he's part of this arc right now, but I do think they've done a great job in crafting this character to make somebody who's interesting that I do want to see more of. I think that's important. Whether or not they ever use him again is irrelevant. I don't mean it that way. You should want to see a character again, though, if they're crafted properly. That says a lot about the dynamic of the creation of the character and adding something new to the mythos that maybe is something you can use again. I like that his friend, when he's saying that he's going to quit, his friend's like, listen, he's done so much for all of us. I respect him. I have the ability to manipulate him. I'm not going to do it. And the reason why I'm not going to do it is it's wrong. It's after everything this guy's been through, everything this guy's done for us, it is just wrong. I find both of them and their partnership interesting. I find the whole world that they live on interesting. That's something when you add something, you could easily have gone to characters that we've known before, characters that are more associated with Darkseid. And instead, they introduce something new. He had a wife and a child, and those are things that he looks at, saying, look at my loss. And I really find that whole thing very, very interesting. And that was a big focal point of this issue that I thought was great. So, I don't know. It's a really cool book right now. I love seeing Superman using that building that was transported to the jungle and solving the mystery. It was very Superman. I always liked Superman having this sense of alien technology and being this smart man that could do those things. And bringing that part into this book, I think, has been nothing but a help. His costume is wicked cool. I at first, like when they first revealed him in it, I enjoyed it. I liked it. I liked the fact that it harkened back to the classic. But now that he and John have talked it through, it's funny how the New 52 Superman's costume won me over when they started telling the story of the suit, right? This won me over when they started telling the story of the suit. And I liked it was him and his son. I'm like, oh man, this suit really has a lot more meaning to me now, and it's super cool the way that they've done it. Really great job on storytelling with this, giving you moments that make things that you didn't have to tell the story of matter more because you did, and you did it in a way where it makes sense. They're really taking advantage of the fact that this book's bi-weekly in the pacing and the delivery, because I do feel it's a different pace. When you know you've got 2 issues a month, I do think you have an ability to expand out certain story elements that you probably wouldn't do in a 30-day offering. This book has benefited from that, and I think that's why you're saying what you said before, where you're looking at both Superman books and saying, I'm really feeling like an energy of them being interconnected. I think it's because of the fact that you're able to do a different sort of pacing with the way these books are being released that I think benefits us as the reader. I think it's why I'm enjoying it more. I think it's the more prompt delivery, getting it every other week. Even when I'm stockpiling it, it's nice to be able to read 5, 6 issues. And I mean, really, when I'm talking about 5 issues back to back, it's really 2.5 months, which isn't a lot. Because I got behind because of classes. I was taking 2 classes. So I've got a number of books where I've got a stockpile sitting with them right now. I'm just enjoying, like, okay, what book do we want to talk about this time? Let's talk Action Comics, reading it through and going, oh my gosh, that was such a great experience. I don't mind my stockpiles at all when it's this quality.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, actually, when you have, a couple issues to go and you just bam, 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 knock them out. Then, because, we've talked on the show, like I've got my 3 read-throughs. Well, when I've got a stockpile like this, I don't do my traditional 3 read-throughs. I'll read one, and then go back through and art read, and then the third follow. So when I binge read them all, and it's kind of a cool, especially it's a bit of a lengthy process, but it's one of those things that's worth it because I really like just okay, that issue's done, next issue, that issue's done, next issue. And I love just attacking and just digesting this. It's it's one of those that again having more issues per month, having more, they can do more, and it's even just if you have more and you're putting out garbage, it's just more garbage. Well, this is more quality. So it's just having more isn't just a key to this. They're having more and they're giving us, it's that whole, and you have the anticipation. Well, they're exceeding expectations. Every week they keep doing that with Action. And I'm absolutely just, as I've said multiple times, how thrilled I am with this. And it's, one of the things that you talk about the costume. I've been fans of all the costumes as they come out, and the one thing that I really have been digging, I've been digging Luthor with the S. How it started off with him doing it as a you to the dead Superman, kind of the ultimate insult is wearing your enemy's symbol on his chest and making it his own, making it everyone call him Superman. I love that, just that whole arrogance that he was doing with it. But I'm starting to see Luthor Luther's opinion, I think, is changing of Superman as much as Superman's opinion of Luther is changing. And I want to see if this continues or if we're going to get a swerve, if we're going to get a twist, because part of me thinks that we kind of need, after this story arc is done, Luther gives up the emblem saying, okay, we have a Superman. And actually gives the nod to Superman. He's still got his superpowered armor. He still has his mother box, and he's still extremely dangerous. But maybe he doesn't have the S on his chest anymore. I think that would be kind of an interesting story because once again, you're like, is Luther doing that to honor Superman, or is he doing it as a one of his little thing to get Superman to drop his guard? Is it you still would have that questionability of Luther is he doing it because it's the right thing, or is he doing it because he's got another plan?
My favorite page is the last one. I have to save Lex Luthor when he's flying off. It's just so iconic to see Superman flying towards. I mean, it's really just, this book just makes me smile. And I really enjoy that. Superman in general is just making me smile right now. The family, John, the whole aspect to it. You always do the dun-da-da. I feel it in this book. I really do. And I feel it in the Superman books in general. Both books right now. I'm really feeling those moments. It's funny. I've said it on the show before. I misrepresent myself when I say I'm a Batman guy. Because, as a kid, I was heavily influenced by Super Friends. I was influenced by the Filmation Superman cartoons. Superman comics, Superman Muhammad Ali, when that came out, I read that right away and loved it. DC Comics Presents, I read issues of that. Superman was more a title, though, because I was a Batman fan first. Superman was a title I really had to resort to reading when I got boxes at flea markets. But man, there was invariably, because Superman has such longevity, you had some decent Superman books in there. And getting to read the history of that character, I really enjoyed it. The Christopher Reeve movies were just big influences. I remember that first one. I saw it in the theater. And did you see that in the theater? The Donner one?
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
That on the big screen as a kid, because
it was huge, yeah.
Especially at that time, everything was so cutting edge. I remember being in awe of it, and of Krypton, and everything that they did there with Jor-El and the dad. And then Clark was such a great guy. We knew the bumbling thing was, his mask that he was putting on, but we were in the know. Clark almost, when he would, pull down his glasses and do certain things, we were right there riding alongside him. And I think that was so empowering as a kid, to see that and just feel like you were a part of this journey with Clark Kent. And I remember the Cleveland anniversary of Superman when they had that poster. Did you get that one, that two-sided rectangular poster? One side it was Clark opening up his shirt coming out of the phone booth. The other side, it was him flying out of the phone booth as Superman. Do you know what poster I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I have it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have it.
Yeah, but I mean, as a kid when that came out, I remember having that. I mean, especially with his rich history in Cleveland. I don't know. Superman's a character that really is important to me, and there's been runs that have been very important to me over the years. It's great to right now feel like Superman is that flagship character again, and I really do feel that that's where the shift is right now. I feel like this character has become a flagship character again. I think they brought him back at the right time, this Superman, made his story so interesting because he's been the fish out of water, and now he's not. Now he belongs. And I do feel that's the change now, too. It's just fun. I feel like this is Superman now. Look out. And I love seeing him fly off and feeling like, man, he's fighting imposing enemies that really give him a run for the money, but he's still Superman, and he still has this urge to protect others. He got stabbed by a knife that I was assuming had some kind of kryptonite-type qualities, and he's concerned about keeping his son safe. And I loved seeing that, because it's very Superman in the way that he handles himself. Not worried about himself, worried about, I don't know the nature of this threat, don't know how far this threat's going. John, you got to stay on the outside of this one. I really like that relationship, the dynamic, and how it works. This is just it's a terrific book. And it's consistently on my short list. This is what DC reading is like for me right now, though. If you asked me to put together a top 10 list of my favorite DC titles right now, I'd struggle. I would really, really struggle because from week to week, I have trouble deciding what books I want to read first because they're so good. I think the creative juices are great right now. I think somebody right now, if you're reading a DC book right now and you aren't digging it, maybe it's not your cup of tea, do yourself a favor and switch, because I think there's so many cool books out there right now that I think are just hitting it out of the park, that I think there's something for everybody in this lineup. The creative talent they have working on these books right now are great. I'm excited for the expansion. More titles coming out of this quality. They've set a high bar. They need to keep the bar high. I think, as a foundation group of books, they've done a great job with these. Do you want to talk a little Cave Carson?
Sure. Next discussion will be on Cave Carson has a Cybernetic Eye #3. It's written by Gerard Way and John Riviera, with art by Michael Avon Oming, Oeming, colors by Nick Filardi. Filardi. I'm just going to start spelling these things because I'm going to butcher people's names, and I don't want to do that. Letters by Clem Robbins, covers by Michael Avon Oming with Nick Filardi. Variant cover by Paul Rentler with editor by Molly Mahan. Wow, I'm sorry about that one. Yeah.
This book was real interesting for me. I'm familiar loosely with Cave Carson. When I say loosely, I've read Cave Carson in some form of team up, or some form of we've seen a number of these books come over the years where they acknowledge DC's past. So I'm familiar very loosely with Cave Carson, very loosely. It's not a character that I have a strong affinity with. And in many ways, that was freeing, because I went into this book with the first issue knowing that, he was an adventurer and kind of, understanding that whole point, and knowing that the name Cave Carson was reminiscent to kind of what he does. But I didn't know much else. So I got in to start reading this one, and I'm kind of glad that this is one that just kind of the way it organically worked out. We ended up reading 3 issues together. Issues 1, 2, and 3, because I think this book was better served for me in particular. I don't know how it was for you. Like, by the 3rd issue, I'm like, oh, I'm really starting to dig this. I mean, I will honestly say, this is one of my favorite books out of these Young Animal books. And I don't know if you're in the same boat, but for me, what I really like about it is, I like the backstory of this guy who's down and out at first, who was this adventurer, and was totally absorbed into being this adventurer. I didn't know at first if his wife had left him, or, some tragedy had befallen her, if he was responsible or not. Then you find out that, no, she was like this princess from this other world, and a queen, from another world that gave up her life to live a normal human life as they raised their child together. And this is something they kept from their kid. And now it's all coming to a head because that race is going through a war with another race who's trying to invade and take it over. They want their queen back. So they're coming to the planet now to look for the daughter who is the queen. In the meantime, there's people on Earth who are agents for these people that are trying to thwart Cave along the way. And I love how this turns into this, like, it's almost like a Jason Bourne thing, where it turns into this really cool adventure story where you don't know who of Cave's friends can be trusted and who can't be. I love the introduction of this universe's Wild Dog. I really liked how that played out. I love that Cave has a history of taking some of their tech and going hog wild with it. In particular, the vehicle in question. He's like this scientist guy who likes to try out the new toys and have a lot of fun in a story that also has some very deep themes and some darkness to it. It's a nice mix of not going too far into the darkness. So for me, the adventure aspect of it, it's a pulp adventure story that's contemporary. Sometimes with pulp adventure stories, it's hard to make them modern, to make them feel current. And it's got things that I like from, like, your Johnny Quest and those type of things mixed in with it, but never stops feeling contemporary. It's also got a nice Darwin Cook feel to it, which is something I totally mean as complimentary. I think the creative team in general is influenced by a lot of different sources in what they've managed to put together, and I feel like there's a real strong balance of every trick of the trade they're putting in this one. It made this a unique read to anything else I'm reading right now. And 3 issues in, and I don't know that I would have said this in the first issue, Matter of fact, I know I wouldn't have. By issue 3, this is a must-read for me. It wasn't with issue 1. I enjoyed issue 1 greatly. I enjoyed issue 2 greatly. I think by issue 3, I'm like, now I'm understanding the story. I'm really into these characters and what's going on with them. The daughters become interesting to me because of the estranged relationship with the father due to what happened to the mother. And now she finds out everyone's been lying to me. And I'm finding that interesting. And you don't have time to be mad about it because aliens are coming down trying to either capture you to bring you home or to kill you. So it's it's a fun story for what's going on here that I guess this is not at all what I expected. And in many ways it's freeing and I'm enjoying the story. That's my rambling take on it, though. Where are you at? Because you and I have different tastes at times. I don't know if you're in the same boat with this, if this is your cup of tea or not. And I'm actually interested to know if it is or it isn't and why.
Well, we are in different boats on this one.
Okay.
Here's the thing with this book. It's, again, like, one of the things that we do agree on is that my opinion from issue 1 to issue 3 is different. I am enjoying it more by issue 3 than I was in issue 1. So, and that's one of the reasons why whenever I have a book, I never make a chopping block decision based on one issue. I give it a full story arc to see what it fleshes out. And then after the first story arc, then it gets placed on the chopping block. And then the second story arc is where I'll make the final decision. Is this my last story arc I'm going to do with this title? And so this book is kind of heading towards the chopping block, and it's not even a negative thing against it, because some of the stuff you pointed out, I really do. There are some really cool story elements going on with this. Everything how you were talking about with the daughter, and that was, the daughter is one of the piece of the story that I kind of like. I've liked the way they're growing and developing her character and her personality, and they're bringing it out. And you talk about the artwork being inspired. Obviously, this is an influence, a Darwin Cook inspiration. And I dig Cook's artwork. For me, I've been calling all of these young animal titles. I call them. When I look at artwork, I kind of give it categories. And these are categories for my own brain, to help me sort things out. And it's just how I look at artwork. For me, this is psychedelic. I've been calling all the books psychedelic. This one is psychedelic Cook, because there's a heavy Cook, but there is more of the color scheme and the color usages and the color palette that's being applied to it. Like Shade the Changing Girl was pure psychedelic acid trip, and I was absolutely, and that is a high compliment, because I absolutely loved that book, and that was a book where I jumped in. That, for me, of these titles, that's the one I'm like, man, I love this book just because it is a pure psychedelic acid trip. That for me was just and I wanted to see where that story is, and I was thinking off page on that book. With this one, I'm not off page yet. I'm still reading the story, seeing what the story is. I got to go back through and reread the past issues. I go, who is that guy again? Oh yeah, okay. I'm not like as locked in and committed to the story, but there is a solid, good story, and it is some cool looking artwork. I can sit back on my art read-throughs. I can say I enjoyed the art read-through probably more than the read-through, just because I do like this, a different style look to the book. So that is something that, we're both in agreement on. I like the look of it, but for me, it's not. I don't have that connection. Like, I was ranting and gushing about Action Comics just, a couple minutes ago. Because I had that connection. I'm thinking, I'll pay. What about this? What about? I don't have that with this guy. And part of it could be I never heard of Cave Carson before this. I'm still trying to understand who he is and where he got his cybernetic eye and what is the cybernetic eye, and who's his daughter, who's his wife, wait, who's this? Who's the Lucius Malfoy looking kind of guy? What do we got
Paul.
going on?
That is Paul.
Yeah.
You leave my Paul alone.
So it's one of those things that I'm like, I'm still trying to get an adjustment and a connection. Now maybe this won't get chopped. I don't know yet, but it is a definite candidate for the chopping block, just because I don't have this connection with this yet. I don't, and you think back to when we first started reading Doom Patrol, I was like, what the heck is this? Like not the this current. I'm talking like when we first read Doom Patrol, I was like, what? Because I had no idea who the Doom Patrol was. And same thing with Cave. I have no idea who this guy is. So I need some issues. I need a story arc for me to understand whether he's the kind of character I want to continue reading, and I want to be continually invested in him because it's good. So don't ever think I'm saying it's not good. It's just it's like baseball. Baseball is fun. When the Indians were winning, I was excited, but I'm not a baseball guy. I'm a football guy. I love football. I love the sport. I understand the science behind it. I understand the strategy behind football. Baseball, I don't understand all. Basketball, no clue whatsoever. What the different pick and roll and yada yada in this tournament. I don't know. I'm not knocking those sports. I'm a football guy. The same thing with this Cave Carson. I'm not a Cave Carson guy, and but as I said, I'm going to give this the full story arc before I make any final decisions, and there'll probably be another story arc after this one to really say, do I want to keep this or not? And it is a cool story, so I'm not going to knock the quality of the writing, and I'm definitely not going to knock the artwork, because the artwork is artwork. It is actually artistic, so I don't want to knock either of those two. It's not me,
See, and this totally is me. And I think the Darwin Cook reference, I do think this book is separated from the other ones as far as in the art style and the quality and what it's doing for me. And that's not this dispute. I think, that's obviously it's always a personal taste. The creative team on this one, if you had asked me before this, who's Cave Carson, I would have said, well, that's a DC character. That would have been what I would have given you. I would have said, I know he's an adventurer of some sort, and I know he comes from that ilk, and he's part of that crowd. But, like the Sea Devils and those type of things. So I understand his place in DC history. But if you asked me to give you his biography, his story, what's going on, I couldn't tell you any of that. So other than the fact of knowing that he was, in fact, that character, that's about where he stands for me. So I really liked that. And 3 issues in, I think the creative team's done their job for me in the sense they've educated me on their take on Cave Carson. I don't know how accurate this is to what Cave Carson's history was with his cybernetic eye, and I want to know more about that like you do, but I want to know more about it because I'm becoming invested in the book. We're in agreement. The daughter's becoming, to me, a linchpin character because her interactions with Dad has made Dad more endearing to me. I do like Dad's backstory with Mom and what's going on. I like that we don't know all of it yet. It's gradually unfolding. Wild Dog I'm like, Wild Dog's here? Like, what are we doing now? I liked that introduction to it because it was another character that I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool to see a take of this character here in this book. I'm enjoying it. Paul is an interesting Malfoy-looking guy. I agree with you. I kind of knew from the get-go Paul was not going to be somebody good. Paul is not somebody good. He's introducing Mr. Johnny Blake. It looks like Mr. Johnny Blake actually is a good guy. Ace, not so much so. And usually Ace, when you hear somebody is Ace, you think Cave Carson and his friend Ace. Ace is a good guy. In this case, it looks like Ace works for Paul. Ace working for Paul is probably not a good sign about Ace's intentions when it comes to Ace working with Mr. Johnny Blake. So all of this stuff is very Johnny Quest and pulpy to me, and I'm digging it. I'm into it now. I'm with you that it's been a ride to get here, and I think it's interesting to see with the arc. It's going to be interesting to see when this story continues, if you continue on with it, because the onus is really on the creative team to take somebody like you, and to me as well, to get us to the point where we feel like we know these characters enough that we're invested. I think they've done a good job right now in the sense they've at least given you a hook with the daughter, that you're at that point. But really, it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you, the end of the first arc is really going to be very pivotal for you to decide, am I going to keep buying this book or not as I go through? And then when do you make the choice, Jim? So like for you, you get to the end of the first arc and you're in the same place. Let's say you are. What do you do then? I mean, do you give it the second arc? Do you start getting those? Because we pre-order. So obviously you will have already bought some issues of the second arc in your pre-ordering before you've read the end of the first arc. So do you, as a completist, do you buy the whole second arc, or do you just go, you know what, I'm at the end of the first arc, it's not for me, I'm done, I'm not going to keep getting the second arc? How much chance do you give a book like this? How do you make that work for you?
Okay, how much chance I give a book depends on the book. Like this one, as I said, this is a good story, so I'm not knocking the writing. It's just, it's not connecting with me. When I have those type of situations, what I do is the first story arc, after the first story arc, I'll say, okay, it's on the chopping. Then I use the second story arc to actually make the decision, am I going to walk away? And then the end of the third story arc is where I'll time it out for my pre-ordering. So, if this ends up going away, I'll have 3 full story arcs on it, actually. Wow. Just because this is good work. Now, I've had a couple where I gave it the first story arc and I was like, after reading going, this is really not for me. And it didn't get even a second story arc or the third story arc. I think there's only been maybe like 1 or 2 books in my life that I've done a one and done on. Sure. And it was just because there was something that just so threw me off about it. But usually the shortest you'll get from me is it'll be a story arc, or if it's a limited series, usually I'll get the full limited series. I think there may be like 1 or 2 limited series in my life that I didn't go the full limited series. But again, with us doing the pre-ordering and all that stuff, it kind of just goes through, and, so for me, like this one, as I said, it probably by the end of the first story arc, unless this really ends with a whoa, that's kind of cool, it's probably going to be on the chopping block, at the end of the first story arc, and then the second story arc will be the decision, and then I'll figure out the timing on the third story arc, and so I won't order beyond the third story arc, and I'll have the first 3 3 arcs.
I wish this was an animated series. That's where I'm at with this one, because I'm the connection to Johnny Quest and that type of thing is pretty genuine to me. It's that it fits into that kind of category of what I'm digging, and I'm a big Johnny Quest fan. I loved the classic Johnny Quest. This feels like a modern take on it with a great mix of sci-fi throw in there. I love when the Mighty Mole, the Mighty Mole machine, the docking bay of that thing. It's this underground digging vehicle. I'm like, man, that's cool, because I would say I have a certain amount of claustrophobia. Not to the point where it paralyzes me or anything, but I will say that's a fear of mine. Like the idea of being trapped underground or trapped somewhere or something like that. I do think it would be super cool to drive around in the Mighty Mole, though. Kind of, do that kind of thing. I think when you're inside a vehicle and you have confidence that the vehicle can do cool things, it opens up doorways and avenues to you. I'm a big gadget person. I think that goes back to my childhood with Batman. But even Spider-Man had the Spider-Mobile when I was a kid. Doctor Who, had the TARDIS, but it also had the Who-mobile. He had the various different Bessie, the different cars. James Bond. I'm a huge James Bond junkie. I love those films. I love the books. The gadgets, the gizmos, the cars. Everything that they did. The Roger Moore era, I was thinking of Spy Who Loved Me. That Lotus that could go underwater. Yeah. That stuff was all cool. So this is where this book's getting me. It's got the right kind of stuff inside it in the adventure, the gadgets, the gizmos. I'm curious to see where this goes. I want to know more about his cybernetic eye. There's a piece to that. I like that people are creeped out by it. He's like, the guy's constantly analyzing, and he's almost apologizing for it because it's not something he can control, and it's interesting to have that kind of take on it. It's got a little $6 million man in that piece, where people are a little creeped out by the fact that, there's something doing in that socket. And I like that angle. I think it's an interesting sort of angle that people would be talking the people closest to him would be talking openly about that. And I think it's interesting. So there's enough here for me that I'm like, wow, I'm very interested. I actually want to follow up on this book with you, even if we don't do the full issue, as we get closer to the end of the first arc, just to talk about, did this book take a different, and if you could make sure to follow up with us. Just did this book take a turn for you or not? It'd be interesting just to even do a speeding bullets on this where you and I just talk about it quickly. Because I think it's interesting where you're at. I do think the way you talk about books and them being on your chopping block is very similar to what I do. I do give a book some time. I'm with you on limited series. I have maybe a handful in my entire life that I didn't finish. Limited series is almost to me like if it's 5-6 issues, I just want to finish the story from the completionist angle to it. But they tend to get a lot more of a pass. Whereas a book, for me, stockpiling unless life is causing me to stockpile. Like, life right now is causing me to stockpile books. So it's not a statement on quality. But I will say this, to your point, if I notice I'm stockpiling a book and I'm not finding the incentive to go back to it, what I'll do is like our Action Comics read that we just talked about, or even this book, and I read all 3 issues back to back. I really found myself enjoying it by issue 3. If I wasn't having that experience, I'd be in your place where I would be sitting there saying, okay, I want to give this the whole arc. I want to get my head wrapped around this story and these characters. Are they for me, to your point? And if they're not, you get to that point where you're like, you know, I've got so many great books that I'm stockpiling right now. The reality is I'm just never going to get to this. Because I'm not. The completionist in me only goes so far in those cases where I'll chop them. There have been a few books in my lifetime, and you're right, and you're referencing of it. I've got pretty diverse tastes, and I think out of the two of us, I think my elasticity, and this is not a right or wrong, so please, anybody listening, don't take it that way. I think you and I, you have like your certain set tastes and you're pretty comfortable with. There's things that we've done on this show that have been outside of your normal comfort level that some of them you've gotten into, others you have not. And I think it's just our different experience as comic readers. I think I've read a lot of independent comics that are really out there. I think has kind of expanded my horizons on what comics can do. Whereas I think you kind of started with, my most comfortable comic background is traditional superhero, and you've expanded into other avenues from that. So I don't think would you say I'm accurate in saying that?
Oh no, yeah, you're definitely accurate. I'm chuckling because I'm agreeing with you. You know, like that. You do have you have a wider scope on reading and where you're looking at, etc. But you know, it is something. The podcast has expanded the horizons, and that's something that, you know, whenever I go to a con now, I will get, you know, different, you know, I'll hit, creator-owned books, and, you know, which is something I never would have thought about doing in the past. Before pre-Raging Bullets, I never would have thought about, you know, going into, you know, a creator-owned, just completely something different. And what I always do is I always talk to the creator, and I find out, you know, they get how passionate and how excited they are when they're talking about it is the selling point. Because I've had a couple where the person's like, yeah, and they're bouncing off the walls. I'm like, stop, you got a sale right there. I see that fire in your eye. You're going to put it into the story. Let me read it, you know, and I'll do that. And sometimes it pays off, and sometimes I'm like, wow, this is really bad. I wish I hadn't bought it. But the guy was really nice, and he was excited about it. So, okay, I'll give him a couple bucks, but I'm never buying this one again. You know, I've had a couple like that, but there's been a couple like, wow, that was really cool. And yeah, I later try to find the guy, and I can't. Or it was a one and done type of thing. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll keep an eye out for him at the next con, maybe.
You know, it's interesting as we talk about it. I'm really not trying to diminish your tastes because, you know, if we go outside of comics, I know your tastes in novels and movies and television. You know, you've got very diverse tastes. There's not a right or wrong to this. I just think our comic experiences have been very different. So my expectations as far as where stories can go and what characters can do are just different. And that's really what I meant by that. It's not a right or wrong thing. So I think I walk in to something like this with a different sort of open-minded lens to it that maybe you walk in with more of a skeptical lens because it's new and outside of your comfort zone, where it's not, this type of story is not new to me. The character is, but the story's type is not. And I think that's where we're different. And
it's interesting you say it that way because I look at movies completely different. Because movies, I do go out there and I look for something that looks a little bit weird and a little bit freaky and a little bit out there, you know. Yeah. And I like a lot of the independent movie scene where it's not just a big giant robot bashing into buildings, where it is just this interpersonal dialogue of these crazy, quirky characters who are just trying to survive in life. And just those type of stories really, you know, kind of lock me in. And I'll look for stuff out there. And I'm more adventurous when it comes to movies and, television in a way, but it's, more in the movie side, and just, looking at those type of stories in books, I'll find something that's, just a little bit off. And I kind of like those stories that have that. But if for some reason with comics, I do lean more towards your superhero genre, your classic, kind of story that I can have a better understanding of. But, it's, I don't know, it's, it is one of those things where, as I said, I have expanded the horizons on the comic book front, but I don't know, for some reason, just, like in the physical movies in front of me, or the animation, or some of the animated stuff, some of the anime stuff that I've watched, it's weird where I'm looking at the visual and it's a story and it's the movie and it's the moving pictures as opposed to the pictures in my mind's eye that I have when I read a comic book. So I don't know. It is an interesting thought process.
I find Cave's longing for his wife interesting to me, because I'm looking at right now at the page where they're in the, he's got this base in this hidden location. It's in a cave. Big shock with Cave Carson. And he has that vision as he's taking the shower with his wife. And I kept wondering, is she still out there somewhere, and these visions are him connecting with her? Is she gone? I do think she's gone, and he's just longing for her. I think you and I have both been in those situations before where relationships have ended and things like that, and you find yourself longing for somebody. So different when that person has passed on. They had this rich history and a child together, and she left her world to be with him, and they crafted a life together. And I don't know, I found the relationship was something where I was like, wow, Cave's vulnerability in those moments was something I found interesting. I'm surprised the people around him don't think he's nuts because of the way he has these visions, but he seems to react to them in a way that wouldn't throw people off. I just found him endearing because I think we all have those wounds in different ways, and they manifest in different ways. And I like characters where they're not afraid to show their wounded side, their humanity to them, and yet they are competent. His relationship and his talk with his daughter that came afterwards, I thought was something interesting, referencing the fact, and then saying, hey, I know we kind of hid this from you, but you want to go there? And it does kind of take this turn to adventure that I think it's something this book could have kept going really dark, and it didn't. I think the balance of the book is really what I'm liking about it. I think if it stayed dark and depressing all the time, I would be saying something different to you. It's more of this cool adventure aspect that you get from them traveling to these interesting and wacky places that take that story that is very dark and bring it into the light that I'm finding fun and interesting. It's become a fun book for me, and I hope that quality continues for it, because the adventure aspect of it, and I know I keep throwing it out, is really what's making me interested. I did like that one page where they did the, turbines to power, the whole reference to the Batman 66 show. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things where there are cool points and there are cool moments in the book. So I can't knock, it's just, I don't know, I'm just not connected as you are. But though I do agree that scene with his wife, or is the vision of him with the wife or whatever, I did like that, because I liked how they did that, where he's just, they're in the shower or in the waterfall, and he's just resting his head on, just kind of that, that comforting she's just cradling him. And that for me was a really cool looking sequence that, you think about it, it could have been creepy, but this instead was very tender and very, this was really neat looking. And it's one of the things that, I really do like this artwork. This artwork is good. It's, it's that, as I said, it's the psychedelic Cook. It's that Darwin Cook with a little bit more psychedelic edge to it. So there's definitely some neat art styles here, and definitely something that is worth reading.
Now, I don't know that I'm getting the psychedelic vibe in the main story the way you are, but I get why you are, and it's not referencing that. The reason why I'm bringing it up that way is, when you kick into the back with the whole Wonder Twins bit, you want to talk psychedelic, dude. It's in the back of the book. Because I'm actually, I think the way that they're handling this Wonder Twins thing, with it being like this 3-page, comic strip style layout, is perfect for that type of story. I think that's just enough. I like that they throw in other characters too. Like I liked that the story of the Green Arrow was in there as well. I like that they're having fun with these pages. And I think that's the piece that's working for me with it. You go into them kind of going, I don't have to take these real seriously. They're just having fun with this. And they're kind of exploring Zan and Jaina's home world and what it was like to grow up. I like how they have this story where they were taking Gleek back to his, originally back to his home, and Gleek didn't want to go. He wanted to stay with them, and it was like this whole little thing. And then there's references to all the other DC heroes. They're just discovering that they have powers. They haven't really gotten there yet between the two of them. We know it because we know who Zan and Jaina are. So I'm into that. They did their own take on Green Arrow in this that I thought was interesting on Starro Island. And he was Zine Arrow, not Green Arrow. And people mispronounced it because he was dressed in leaves. It's having fun. And I like that they're comic strips because I don't take this as any of it meant to be in any sort of continuity. They're really embracing the Sunday morning strip aspect to it. And I like that because I've always liked Sunday comics. And I think these stories being what they are, the shorter 3-page delivery is what I really do enjoy them. The first issue I was like, huh? What is this and why is it here? By the second and third issue, those I've warmed up to because I'm like, okay, they're not meant to be connected to Cave Carson in any way, shape, or form. They're just having some fun back here. I've kind of embraced that spirit. And I'm enjoying it. This is another thing that I think shifted by the third issue. Although I did like the Gleek story where they were trying to take Gleek home, thinking that they were doing the right thing. Here, you've been living with us forever, and we never asked you to, but now we're going to take you back to another place that you've never really lived before. And we are going to make you live there because we think that's what's best for you. I like that whole story where Gleek's like, huh? Take me home already. And I don't know, it was just fun for me. I'm enjoying the fun factor of this. I'm kind of big on fun right now in my comics. And there's something about this book. It took a turn. It really, issue 3 is where this book has really taken a major turn for me. And I'm all in, which was not my experience all along with it. This was a head scratcher as I was going through. And it kind of goes back to our point of giving a book a shot to at least find out if it's your cup of tea. And then if it's not, to your point, you start looking at, well, what is my exit strategy? Is it I find the book good and I want to see if that turns the corner, which is what you're doing right now, or is it this really is not for me at all and I can just abandon ship? And I've done the abandon ship before where I'm like, it's just not for me. I know it's just going to keep stockpiling and I'm never really going to read it. I've done that before. And it's kind of to your point, I've never really read a comic where I've been like, man, this is bad. And I guess I've just been lucky because you referenced an indie that you picked up where you're like, ooh, that wasn't that wasn't my thing. Usually, I'm pretty good at knowing when I'm talking to an indie creator. I know when I'll pick something up and go, you know what, I'm picking this up just to be nice, or I'm picking this up because I'm excited. If I'm picking it up just to be nice, more often than not, just because I've got so many books, I won't read it. That rarely happens, though, because usually I see the poster, or the display, whatever they've got going at their table, and I can look at what's going on there and go, okay, I want to talk to this person and see what that's all about. Usually that's enough of a hook for me that I'm going to want to read it. If I don't have that, it's the awkward, how do I avoid this person's table? Because I don't want to hurt their feelings, but I also don't want to waste their time. I'm not their audience. Because a lot of times when you can see the poster there and kind of, okay, I admire the creative idea, it's not for me. And I've had that happen when I've gone down the artist alley before, where many times where I've looked and gone, that's not the book for me. But then 2 tables down from them, there's the book for me. So I'm a big fan of indies in general. I always feel terrible going down that artist alley because there's people I walk past and I'm like, I'm really not trying to be rude to you, but I'm not your audience. I'm just not. That doesn't mean you're bad or a bad creator. Your idea is cool. I get it. It's just not me. I'm going to keep moving along. I always feel terrible though because those people are there to pimp their book and get it out to the right audience, and I want them to be successful. I love the ones where I hit them, though, and I'm like, this is a really interesting book. A book that was a surprise to me, that it was somebody we actually interviewed ages ago. It was a New York Comic-Con, I believe. It was New York Comic-Con. Do you remember that Sky Pirates of Valandor? Do you even know what I'm talking about? Yeah. That was one I really liked. I remember when he came down, and Everett Soares was his name, I believe. And I'm probably butchering his last name, so I apologize. I just remember from inside there. And he and his wife came by. I believe it was his wife. They were talking about that book, and I just remember him, talking about the premise of the story and things like that. And I remember just being really into the pitch. I'm like, this is the book for me. I ended up reading it and really enjoying it. And I loved, it was what you said earlier. I loved his enthusiasm and what he was talking about. And that's what it's the right hook where it's a type of story that I'd be interested in, the creator being enthusiastic about it. When it comes off on the page, and it did with this, I'm like, okay, this is like his cool creator-owned book that I'm like, I'm really into this world. So, and you want those things to be successful. A book that I just recently, it was a Kickstarter, I want to say it was last year, Star Child by James A. Owen. He did a Kickstarter where it was the collected Star Child, and they were taking all of the indie stuff and some extra materials and putting it together this really fine crafted hardcover. And Star Child was one of those that had interesting issues with, they'd done the initial first arc of it, and then he had some kind of accident or some kind of illness or something where he couldn't finish some of the issues. Certain other creators came in to help him to do these fill-in issues of it. And then the book got back on track. Then it had like a volume 2 and a volume 3, but never seemed to really get back on the regular release. The reason why that's valid, I always loved the story. And every time there was a new issue, no matter how long it took, even if it was like a year later, 2 years later, 3 years, 5 years later, because this book took a long time to get out, I was always grabbing the issues of it. It really wasn't completed to where James A. Owen wanted to take it. But man, the stories that are there were ones that I really love. I love his artwork, and it all just kind of meshed together. So it was one of those where when the Kickstarter came up to support it, I'm in. Athena Voltaire, Steve Bryant, remember him?
Oh, yeah.
His book's now over at Action Labs, and I really am glad to see him back in the saddle again with that. They released a compendium. He's got the new version, the new story out right now, which I supported on Kickstarter. He just announced recently that he wants the book released more frequently, so he's not going to draw every issue of it. He's going to have art teams do he's going to do all the writing, but have them do some of the drawing on it. Then he'll draw some of the issues too. I was glad to hear that because I really liked the creation. It was an example of a creator-owned character that I wanted to see more of, and I'm glad that it's getting a second life. Those are the types of things, like when you hit those magic indie books that you're like, wow, I'm really behind this. I've actually got a Steve Bryant, I framed it. He did a Batman and Batgirl for me, and years ago I ordered a commission from him off the internet, and he sent it to me, and I've got it framed here. I love it. I love his work. And really excited that Athena Voltaire's back. So this book, it's kind of appropriate to talk about this. Like, why are we talking indie so much? This just does feel like an indie book. And I think that's the point of the Young Animals line, is for it to feel like a little something different than you would normally get from DC. I'm finding that to be a great success. I'm really digging this line in general. It is in my comfort zone and wheelhouse because it's the kind of books that I really like from the indie scene. So I'm glad to see these books finding some success. So to jump away a little bit from the indie scene and back into the DC scene, want to talk Batman?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, in a coming up episode, we're going to be talking about Detective Comics, and I wanted to go to Detective Comics sooner because I'm really digging that book. But man, this issue number 12 hit, and I said to you, we got to talk about this one. There's some things to talk about in this one. So this is issue number 12 of Batman. I Am Suicide Part 4. Tom King is the writer. Mikel Janin, it's Janin, and man, I want to know how to pronounce his name properly because I know I probably butcher it every time, but he was the artist on Grayson, and whew, do I love seeing him here. Mikel Janin and Hugo Petrus on inks, June Chung on colors, Clayton Cowles letters, Mikel Janin on cover, Tim Sale and Brennan Wagner on the variant cover. Rebecca Taylor's the associate editor. Mark Doyle's the editor. Batman created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger. This book rocks. So rocks my world. And now we're at the point where it's like I'm saying to myself, why didn't I start with this first? Because I really wanted to talk about this. Catwoman turned on Batman. I don't know where that's going to go. If she's going to come back to the side of the light or not. what I'm finding right now is we got Batman walked in with a team. Some of his team's been captured. Some of the team is turned. Bane's in control right now. Batman's trying to rescue people back home, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. The piece we find out about this that I really want to jump to right away, okay, I Am Suicide's the name of this story. Batman's talking about his connection with Catwoman, implying that as a kid, now here's the thing, is it metaphorical that Bruce Wayne died and he became something new? Or did he really try to kill himself as a kid? How did you take that, Jim? Because I could see it where he's connecting metaphorically with, he had a certain point in time in his life where the Bruce Wayne that was died and he became the person that he is growing, he grew into. Or did he really try to off himself? I say that way, and I really am not making light of suicide, so let's keep it that way at the moment. We're talking about a comic book character right now versus a real happening, though, so let's keep that in mind. Real suicide is not a joke. But in this particular case of the story I'm looking at, we've now done that, and how do we feel about that? Do you take that as Tom King was being metaphorical, or that this is something now he's added into the Batman mythos as part of Batman's storytelling?
I took it as literal. You know, that Bruce actually did that. And that was one of the, and I think this is adding this to the new canon on who is Batman, as a kid, because we always say that, it's, the Batman is just a creation of a little kid. Well, right now they're taking even a step further, that it's not just this, that it's the, the samurai used to have the code where, they were already dead. And it's through, when they go into battle, they're already dead. And it's, you earn your life after when you come home. And it's not, so when you are in battle, you're not thinking about your life because you're already dead. It's only in victory. It's only in your return home. It's only in that you actually, once again, are alive. So it's that mindset and kind of introducing this young Bruce Wayne thought that. For me, that was a really cool thing. I was like, man, that's a cool story. And I 100% took it that he actually did that. That this kid, when because it's, you talk about just the intensity that, he needed to have to become this intense adult. It started right there at that moment. And I thought that for me was a really cool kind of like, wow, sight of thing.
So it didn't take anything away from the story for you. It added another layer.
Oh God, no! It added 100% added, because again, it shows I've said the intensity a couple times. I'm going to say it probably a couple more times because that's a very good description of him. Because it's in one hand you could say he's a post-traumatic stress disorder created Batman. The fact that he witnessed his mother and father getting killed, created, the bat. Well, they're taking it now to another level, that it wasn't even just creating the bat, it's the death of Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne, because the big argument, the big debate is, who is the real Bruce Wayne? Is it in the cowl? Is it the disguise? We've thrown out there that it's that person we see interacting with Alfred and interacting with Tim and Dick and Damian. That's the real Bruce Wayne. But in a way, they're kind of taking it that, there is no more Bruce Wayne. There's only Batman, and there's the mission, and that's kind of it's kind of a neat way to look at things. But there is always that road home. There is always that possibility that maybe someday the pain will end, and maybe we'll get Bruce Wayne back. Maybe there'll be a moment in time when he won't be Batman anymore, and. I like that notion. I like thinking that.
It's funny. I guess I read that a little differently, and I don't know that we're necessarily. I don't mean that we're off in how we're looking at it. In my case, I'm looking at it like this. He died and came back to life. Or tried to kill himself and survived. And when you do that, one of two things happens. You find a new direction, you find a new lease on life, you find out who you are or who you need to be moving forward to survive and to keep living and to feel value. Suicide, it's one of the reasons why I stopped myself, and I was doing some joking earlier on with it, but it is something I take very seriously. It's a little different when it's a comic character and a little easier to joke around about. But It is when somebody hits that low of a point where they feel the only avenue for them is to end it all, to end life. It's something. It's an uncomfortable moment for me to talk about because, I value life highly, but I think we've all been at points where we've been depressed and had self-doubt and gone to a very low place. Fortunately, there's been people there that have helped pull you back up, and they do that. In Bruce's case, he was left with his butler in a very harsh world. He saw his parents die. That's a being there and being a part of it and not knowing whether or not you were going to live in that scenario. In certain cases where they've shown it, he actually had a gun pointed at him and was ready to be shot until the police showed up. Joe Chill ran. So depending on what variation of that you're taking, this kid was through a horrible trauma that resulted in watching his parents die, him almost dying, him feeling responsible for it because of the Zorro movie and the whole bit. That crushing piece on there, you can see why this kid would head down that path. It's sad. But then to see him come back and reinvent himself, I think my take on Batman right now, one of the things I'm really enjoying about Batman, I think the guy in the cape and cowl right now that we see there is the same guy we see out of the cape and cowl. I think that is Bruce Wayne. I think that is Batman. I think he's the same guy when he talks to Alfred. He's in that same mode. The mask is a little more blurred now. I don't know if you agree, but I'm finding that in the comics with the way that he's not that, I'm Batman. I think when we started doing this podcast, there was the Batman that was pushing everyone away. I don't see that same guy anymore. I see this being a very different Batman. And I think a great example of this would be the recent Superman issue, right, where we saw the Super Sons team up. And we saw Bruce and Clark interacting both in and out of the costume. I don't know that the guy outside of the costume was all that different than the guy in. And I like that. I like the shift. I think that's been something that isn't it's an evolution versus a departure. We've seen him evolve into this character that he is now. I think in many ways being comfortable in his own skin or cowl, I think it's been an area of growth with Bruce. And I think it's something that you can attribute to his rebirth from Bloom. That whole storyline where he came back and he kind of had to reinvent who Batman was. I like that it's continued here. And I think their handling of him in this book, I think the masks are still there and there still is that version, but I do think the line between them is much more blurry now. And I quite like it. This opening page, when I'm looking at that, I don't know that this is any different than the guy outside of the cowl because I could take that cowl off right now, and I guarantee you that even if the cowl wasn't there, Bruce Wayne would be doing the same thing in those moments. And I like this. I like this story a lot for it. I will say the suicide revelation bothered me at first. I mean, to the point where I was angry. And then it's funny how, it's a great example of our second read-through, third read-through. You start wrapping your head around it and going, okay, what does this really change? Not much. It's interesting, and I think you're right. It's interesting in the sense that I think I want to see Alfred and Bruce talk about this at some point. What happened? How did Bruce want life? What was it that made him want to live? And where did that go? And I think that's starting to be alluded to in this story, but I think there's a story to be told here outside of it that's compelling and interesting. I don't know if Tom King has plans to get to it. I would imagine on some level you do if you're titling the whole story, I Am Suicide. I didn't see the title of the story being that.
Yeah, I was thinking because Suicide Squad.
Yes.
It's his Suicide Squad. And, it's interesting that because this has it adds a second meaning to the title.
Sure.
Because I still link to the fact that this is his Suicide Squad. But this issue did have some kind of an interesting revelation and a change to it about how much, because that was a shaping factor in making Batman, a shaping factor in who Bruce Wayne is. Suicide is an interesting situation in that you can't, no one can truly understand what someone is going through at that moment. Even if you've had your own thoughts, even if you've attempted it, or if you've had loved ones that who have done it, every single individual is going to have a little bit different, mindset, and it's going to affect them differently in the future. You're going to, there's going to be some commonalities, obviously, and there always is whenever you have a situation like that. But in the end, it's the person approaching it and how the person gets out of it. There's, certain people that, you could take in an event like this and it can make you stronger. And you can say, hey, what was I thinking? I can't be that person. I'm going to, and they take that darkness that they were in and they turn it into something that, creates, this positive outlook. And in a way, that's kind of how, Bruce did it. He took that moment of death and made it, made something good out of it, but he's still holding on to the darkness. He's still not completely giving into a life, and it's where the quirks on this.
I'm going to stop you there. This is why I think it's metaphorical, and I'm still going to stick with that. And I'm going to tell you why. And here's the thing: I still think him hitting that point, because I've wrestled with this. Part of me thought like, okay, this is literal. Another part of me thought it was metaphorical. Here's the line that makes me think it's metaphorical. So he goes through his whole thing about how it was pain, just pain, no one answered, we pray. I saw and I understood, finally, kindness, dignity. I let the razor fall, and I understood it was done. I'd done it. I'd surrendered. My life was no longer my life, and I whispered, I swear by the spirits of my parents to avenge their deaths by spending the rest of my life warring on all criminals. Now, how do you make that pronouncement when you just let the razors fall? I think the razors fall were metaphorical in the sense that he ended life as he knew it, and made the commitment to become this soul of this sword of vengeance, so to speak, to go after those that, I swear by the spirits of my parents to avenge their deaths by spending the rest of my life warring on all criminals. So I don't know. He says, so that's what it is. The ears, the belt, the gargoyle. It's not funny. It's the choice of a boy, the choice to die. I am Batman. I am suicide. So his death was the death of Bruce Wayne, not a physical death, but a death of who Bruce Wayne was to become Batman. It was the suicide of Bruce Wayne to become Batman. I don't know that it was a physical death. And I question it when I read those pages, because when I'm reading that, where did he die? I don't see it.
I'm not saying he actually killed himself.
No. But where did he try to there? Well, how do you say I let the razors fall and now I'm pledging that? Where? I don't, here's the thing, I don't see it. I think it's metaphorical razors. He let the razors fall on the life of Bruce Wayne.
Again, it could be he had the razor right there. He had the razor to his wrist. He didn't actually slice, but he actually physically had it. And he had that moment. And that could, again, it could be a complete metaphoric statement, and if it is, cool. I got no issues with it being a metaphor, but it's just one of those things with when you get in that mindset of suicide, when you get into that thing where you say, yes, I am going to take my life. Yes, I am going to end it. Sometimes, when you deal with people who are dealing with suicide, it's an instant gut, just bam, quick reaction. There's no long thought process. But you get sometimes when someone's looking at it and they're studying the process and they're actually, and it's as this contemplation that you're doing, and you have that moment where you're like, yes, I'm going to do it, and you have that it's like a calm will rush over you, and you say, this is it. Okay, I made the decision, and you're locked, and you go through, and in Bruce's case, he didn't actually slice, but he had that moment where he said, yes, I can do this. And for him, it was the taking of the yes, I am dead didn't physically result in a death, but resulted in the birth of Batman, resulted in the mission, resulted in the creation of this. So he took that death, he took that darkness, and he turned it into something. And it could very easily be all metaphoric, and if that's the case, hey, that's cool, because that is a neat, again, like you, suicide is not a joke, it's not a thing, but it is a powerful message, and it is a powerful tool that can be used to tell a story. And we're seeing a very powerful tool right here being told by a Batman story, that it's not just a physical, this isn't, it's multiple levels of who, you know, the creation of Bruce, that if as a kid, if he was able to have this type of level of thought, if he was able to look and make this pledge and make this, you know, you kind of understand how he is who he is nowadays if he did this back then. This wasn't just a kid who was traumatized by his parents. This was a kid whose life completely changed on that day.
Sure.
And he stopped being the kid.
It was a surrendering of his life to a mission. I don't know. I could see it going either way, and I think later issues of this, I wonder if there's going to be clarification of it. I don't know if there needs to be or not. If he really physically did it, I think there's a story to be told there that I'd want to read. If he didn't, and maybe it's meant to be nebulous, you know, meant to leave us thinking as readers. I don't know. I'm going to be curious to see where this goes from here. I thought this issue was compelling to me.
Yeah.
As I was reading through it, I went to the point where I think I read it very surface level at first. I got mad. I'm like, did they just say Batman committed suicide as a kid? I don't like that. That was my first reaction. That really was my first reaction. Then I read it through again, and I'm like, oh, there's something interesting here. Let me go back through it and read it. And so then I was reading the dialogue again more closely and really getting into the head of a child going through this. And I'm like, did he do it? Did he not? Yeah. And then I'm kind of like, and I started reading those 2 pages, and I'm like, now this is where I'm wondering, did he actually do anything other than hit rock bottom to the point where he said, the life that I had, I'm surrendering it. I'm giving it up. In all essence, I'm killing the boy that I was and being reborn as something new, devoting myself to this, because his life is never going to be a quote unquote life in the way that, with balance, with a lot of happiness, with family and children and those things. He's not going to have those normal comforts. You know, Bruce is not going to be. Yeah, they've done a movie issue before where he watched movie with his immediate family of sorts, but he's never going to have the comforts of retiring and relaxing and doing those things. He's always going to be this guy who's driven to this mission. It's an interesting sort of commitment. It really is ending a life as you normally know it. I do want to say one thing as we talk through this. This is a great example of a book that needed an art read-through because so much cool stuff was going on with the dialogue. I had to go back through. It's one of the reasons why I wholeheartedly wanted to apologize at the beginning, because there's some of these sequences where he's fighting these soldiers where we see, it's not shoulders. He's fighting. He's got a real war against shoulders. No, he's fighting these soldiers. And you see him in different motion sequences on the same page, building towards, from the background to the foreground. This is some of the most gorgeous artwork. That page where he says, I am suicide, and you see all those soldiers lying on the floor like he was doing some origami or something with them. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful artwork. Oh my gosh, is this a pretty, pretty book? Batman, as a character, has really enjoyed very, very pretty books over the years. This is no exception. They just recently announced that Greg Capullo, I'm probably butchering his last name, and Scott Snyder are doing the summer 2017 event. Greg has signed another exclusive with DC because he was off doing creator-owned work, and now he's coming back. That's the artist that really worked with Scott Snyder during his major run. Thrilled to see that artist coming back. But my gosh, on the main Batman title, do we have a marquee art team right here? I am blown away by these issues, the pages of this book. Man, is this just a fun, beautiful read, seeing Batman fight his way to Bane to the point where he's collapsing in front of him. What's next, Batman, from this? What is next for you? I need to know. You have been betrayed. You have been defeated. You need this thing. Is Psycho Pirate influencing some of this? I don't know. This is just a crazy, crazy ending, seeing Selina behind Bane and what's going on there. The power of that moment, I was just like, issue 13, I can promise you, is going to be my first read. I'm going to read it multiple times. I'm just as excited about this. I remember when the Bloom run hit, where Bruce finally kicked the door down and came on in. I knew that issue I read over and over again. He's like, where's my cave? That whole bit. I just remember that sequence and how powerful it was. Then the issue where he made the choice. I remember reading that. I was on for work. I was at a conference. And I remember getting up at the crack of dawn, well before the conference was on, and downloading the issue from Comixology and reading it 3 times in the morning. And I'm just like, I could read it another 4, but I got to go. That type of excitement is something that you rarely get. And when you get it with a character that you love as much as I love Batman, man, is that a special moment. This story has that. Like, this is a book that's a must-read. It's funny to talk about this, and I know next episode we're going to talk about Detective Comics. It's very similar to what we were talking about with Action and Superman right now. We've got some books with just some top-tier marquee creative teams on them. Our top-tier characters are doing this again. They're making noise. You know, for lapsed DC fans, I'm glad that they're coming back now to these books with Rebirth, because this isn't exclusive to Batman and Superman. The universe right now is just having this really cool life to it. And I hope these books continue to sell gangbusters, because this type of creativity, you know, especially with things like Young Animals and stuff like that, here's the beauty of it is, let's say Kate Carson winds up not being your cup of tea, right? The great thing about this lineup right now, I have no hesitation telling people, you can find something DC's putting out you're going to like right now, because between Vertigo and Young Animals and the main line, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on at DC at the moment. I want to talk soon about Clean Room, that Gail Simone book. Ooh, what a great read that is. There's just so much neat stuff going on. But here's the thing I love. My guy, Batman, this is the kind of story I'm getting from Batman every month. Oh, this I Am a Suicide Story has really been one that's captivated me. It was funny how you can take an issue where I was like, there was one point where I was like angry over the choice that they made. Now I'm saying this is like the greatest issue ever. What a crazy journey with this. I like the emotion. This is what comics are all about. They should have stories that challenge you, make you think, make you, grow and be interested in what's going to happen next, make you talk about it. I wanted to talk about this issue. This is one where I told you we were going to originally do this as part of Speeding Bullets, as part of the Invasion episodes that we had, and it just didn't work into the schedule that way. I'm glad we did it this way, because I wouldn't have wanted to do this issue, Speeding Bullets. I think we needed to spend more time talking about this book in particular and what it's doing right now, because it's really a book that's shaking things up. You need to do this. You can't play it safe with these characters. You have to get people talking about it. But not just you talk about it on the show, and you've done this since we've started, about controversy for the sake of controversy, or is it for the sake of telling a good story, right? Are we doing these things just to get people angry, or are we doing it because we're trying to tell a really great story? This is one of those where it's not controversy for the sake of controversy. It's throwing out there something that's in your face and getting you thinking about these pages. I love the debate we were having over it. Did this really happen? Did it not? I don't know that there's a right or wrong to that. I don't know that we're ever going to know the truth. And I don't know that I care. I don't know how you feel about that. Okay, so a funny thing happened in between recordings. Issue number 13 came out. And to the point of issue number 13 coming out, all kinds of cool stuff came out of this discussion now that Jim and I really need to talk about at the moment. Issue 12 was fantastic, but issue number 13 blew my mind. Because the cool part is the Catwoman swerve was so convincing. I was convinced that at this point Catwoman had really turned. Issue number 13 hits you. Oh my God, he had her waiting in the wings. It was great. But not only her, now you understand every member of the team had a purpose, especially Wesker. So if you're going to try to get Psycho Pirate, right, you need somebody who Psycho Pirate can try to work on that's own psychoses will not allow him to be controlled.
Only one person controls the ventriloquist.
I love that Scarface showed up on the scene, and Scarface is the one that captured, because Scarface is the one that did it. Scarface is the one that captured Psycho Pirate. It was the greatest thing in the world.
Dude, man, that was outstanding. I was sitting there the whole time I'm reading this going, what the heck is he doing there? And then even when Bronze Tiger picks him up and he's following, and he's just standing there waiting, and they come and get it. I'm like, okay, what's he doing? And then right as they start doing the other voice, I'm like, but he doesn't have, but you see the hand, like here it is. I was howling just because, just the physical hand, that's going around at Scarface without Scarface on it. But it's just the mindset. Once again, Batman and the strategery that he has, he had everything laid out perfectly. Punch and Judy were awesome with how, with again, I was thinking their throats were slit and they were dead. No, they were the lineup. They were the escape. They were the escape route. They had to die to get fed through the heat. And I was like, man, this is everything laid out. What the hell? Batman is the best.
and Bane, really trying at this point to psychologically get at Batman, saying, we both quest for monsters, and the monsters are the ones we want to die in the arms of the monster, and because of that. And I love that this is all a part of Batman's plan. I want to break your damn back. And he kept going back to that. And I'm like, why does he keep going back to that? I love that the whole plan all along was to have Catwoman do it. I didn't see that coming. Oh my gosh, did I love that moment. Because she started getting uncomfortable with what Bane was doing to Batman. Because Bane's beating up on Batman. She's like, Bat. And when Bane finally caught on is when Batman said, it's time, take him down. I loved how that sequence played out. Oh my gosh, was it great. And then Batman referencing it later in the issue when he goes to Bane and goes, listen, you're going to want to come back after your monster. Remember this and don't. Remember your happiness. Remember all that peace. Of course, it's Bane. And Bane's driven out. I want Venom. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited for it because there's a Bane follow-up story coming to this. I want to see it. So cool.
Oh, God. Now, the question, though, one of the things I do wonder, because I liked how they laid out afterwards, obviously Tiger gets a pardon. Catwoman's still in jail because she killed 237 people. Ventriloquist is, going to get into more specialized help to help him. But can you really help the guy? Because at first I'm thinking, okay, he's done with his whole dummy thing. No, they still has, Scarface persona. And then you got the other two that I was like, man, this is, I loved how they laid this out, but I do wonder where they're going to go with them. What are they going to do? Is this a one and done? Are we going to get more of the Batman Suicide Squad?
I don't know. I don't think we're going to get a regular team out of this crew. Only because of the fact that we've already got a team on Detective Comics. So I think this is a done and one. I think this was specific for this mission, and everyone's going to get paid off the way that they were supposed to get paid off. There's one piece I actually don't want to throw out the window that we should talk about real quick. Yeah. The Amanda Waller.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the fact that they put this in the book. The lead into the Justice League Suicide Squad crossover, where Amanda Waller meets with Alfred first to get the files that she needs for that piece. I thought that sequence was really fantastic, and I liked how that was incorporated into this issue. I appreciated it. I'm a fan of shared universes. I always loved, in particular, Valiant and Malibu, when they were doing their shared universes, the Ultraverse and the Valiant universe, how they would, when it made sense, have those books have references to things going on in other titles to give you a sense of time placement. Where does this book take place in relation to what's going on in the rest of the universe? So I appreciated it being done here. I think it's something where it got me excited for that. It made me feel like this is part of a larger universe. Batman's part of the Justice League, so absolutely he should be a part of this. I just thought it was cool. I thought it was really a cool lead-in.
No, the couple stuff I throughout this sequence, had me again thinking off page of what if this, what about that? Like Alfred actually fighting Amanda Waller. That would have been kind of interesting to see. Alfred saying, I'm not going to let you take the files. You're going to have to earn them. And actually have because Waller can throw down. Waller's dangerous. She's not just a bureaucrat. She's nasty, and and we know the Beagle can throw down as well. So that would have been kind of for me. I would have done it off page. You wouldn't need to see it, but later on, next issue when Bruce shows up home, comes home, I would want to see Alfred a little messed up, but. Then, of course, the other thought that I had in my head, which would have been a neat scene, but it would have thrown things way out of whack, is if when she's doing that, if Alfred would have done the, we are not going to let you take the files, and have him speak in plural. And, one of the other members of the Bat family is there. And again, same situation where it would throw things off, but it was one of those things that I think would be kind of neat if we would have seen it.
You know what, though? If she doesn't take the files, it's right. The lead into the story.
Yeah, I know. And it's one of those things where I'm like, it would mess things up and it would complicate things. And this way, this is a better for the story arc being told. So again, I'm not knocking the writing. This was needed, to have the way this played out. And I do like this. I thought this was awesome that she's coming in, and just the way things were laid out between the two of them. This was a great lead into Suicide. But there is that guy in me. It's, as I said, I've said it before in the show. It's the addict mindset where I'm like, 1 is good, 1,000's great. So I like the scene, but I'm like, what about this? What about this? Oh, we get a chance this. And I'm just throwing out all this crazy thoughts that run through my head, that I wish we could do this, I wish we could do that. But in the end, this way right here was a great way to lead this in. This was a great lead into the Suicide Squad, because one, you're wondering what were the files she took, and I'm in my head, I'm guessing they're Bruce's counter Justice League plans. So it's the details on how to take out the Justice League. And that's what Waller has now in her hands, and hence the fight between the Justice League Suicide Squad. Or I could be way off and it could be something completely different. There's something else out there that Waller wants to get her hands on that Bruce knew about, and now the Justice League has to stop the Suicide Squad from getting it. So I don't know what the story behind Justice League versus Suicide Squad is, but again, this was a great lead-in that it teased that and got me wondering and got me already thinking off page on a story I haven't read a single issue on or haven't heard anything about it, other than that it's Justice League versus Suicide Squad. So I think this was one of those. The way they did this, it was the teaser and it got me excited for it. This probably more than the Suicide Squad teaser lead in toward just this for me was the kickoff of the Justice League Suicide Squad story. I thought that was kind of like, this had me jazzed and really going, wow, this is going to be awesome.
One of my favorite lines. I can't believe, we got Bane to voluntarily bring out the pirate. Then we just took the pirate from him. This is impossible. Oh, Bronze Tiger, don't you know? It's not impossible. It's Batman. So great. So great. Such a great moment in the way that it built out, because I didn't see this story going here. I really believe she turned. They swerved me on this. I love being swerved like this, especially when it's a character like this. I love the two with the kiss in that moment where it's just impossible. I grew up loving the Earth 2 Batman and the fact that he married Selina Kyle. I always will have a soft spot that there is a way for these two to eventually be together. I like when they do moments like this, and it's tender, and you know that there's so much working against the two of them, but there is yet so much about the two of them that makes them right for all that's wrong. And I don't know, I loved this whole thing. So the next issue is The Bat and the Cat, and I can't wait to see what that's going to be about. What the Bane situation means, because we know Bane's going to eventually. There's an arc. I don't know if it's right after this, but there's an arc coming up specifically focusing on Bane. And oof, what a great book, man! 13 issues in, and this has just been. There's not been a wasted issue. I mean, not one, not a wasted moment. Page turner after page turner. It's just fun to be reading comics right now. I just think there's so much good stuff going on.
Holy caffeine!
Want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show. Want to remind everyone about our website, RagingBullets.com. We do feed right to Twitter and to Facebook with that. It's a place to find news about show releases. Speaking of Facebook, we have a wonderful Facebook group community. I want to shout them out, wish them happy holidays. Great people over there. This is the place you want to hang out if you are into comics and pop culture. Great people, great community. Thank you to everyone who participates so regularly. It's just such a great crew over there. We're also on Google+. I have a PlayStation Network account. It's Raging_Bullets. And please feel free to add me onto there. We love connecting with you. We are sponsored this episode once again by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. What's going on at DCB Service, Mr. Segulin?
Of course, the 50% off bundles on the Rebirth, bundles on Vertigo, bundles on the Young Animals, and as I said, 50% off when you click on those bundles, so click and save. Also, 50% off Batman 66 meets Steed and Mrs. Peel hardcover. 50% off a hardcover, only $12.49. Thank you, DCBS.
That's a great story, too, so highly recommend it if you haven't read that yet. That's a great way to get it in a hardcover volume. I've been reading that digitally, and that was really a fantastic read. Over at InStockTrades.com, they have their latest releases out, which is really cool. They have the Action Comics trade paperback volume 8, 45% off, only $9.34. The Superman Wonder Woman trade paperback volume 4 is 45% off, only $9.34. Those 45% off deals are a great way if it's something that is just released to be able to grab it at a discount. This one I want to shout out, Irredeemable Premiere Hardcover. You and I are big fans of Mark Waid's book, Irredeemable. And this Premiere Edition collects issues 16 to 23. It's $29.99 regularly, 30% off, only $20.99. This is a great way. I love going to this site and collecting books and things that I originally wanted to grab, and I didn't either have money at the time or I wasn't aware that they were a thing. A lot of times when I get going on my monthly purchases, I end up missing certain things that I really would enjoy. And InStockTrades.com is my go-to site to catch up on those things. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Jim, our next episode, we're going to be back and we're going to be talking about 3 very special books to us. We're going to be talking about, of course, Detective Comics. We're going to be talking some Aquaman. And we're going to be talking Suicide Squad, and particularly focusing on that Justice League versus Suicide Squad book. So it's going to be fun talking about that. We will see everyone next week.
Bye.
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can 2 grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You-Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.